Today's presentation or today's workshop is all about work from home job opportunities for pharmacists. So if you're a pharmacist looking for a remote opportunity, you are in the right place. And real fast, just want to kind of cover today's agenda for you. And so first of all, we're going to talk about why is everyone so interested in working remote. We're also going to talk further about what are these particular jobs, how do you actually land these remote opportunities, and then towards the end, we're going to take some time for question and answer. We had a huge response with the questions that poured in, so we're excited to answer a couple of those. And then if you will stay to the end with us, we are going to reward you with our remote pharmacist pamphlet here. Talks about a variety of the different jobs that are out there. A lot of people know of a couple, but this is filled with several jobs. And if you stay till the very end, we'll definitely get that to you via email here. And so during the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat there. Kurt Hines is on the chat room, manning the station, and I'll be happy to answer the questions you have along the way. And then the nice part is any and all questions you have, we intend on answering them even after the presentation. So feel free to write them there. And then this is a quick snapshot of our team. So we have Kurt, Melissa, and I are on this workshop today. Just a brief introduction of myself. So I've been doing this for about 12 years. I've done a variety of different coaching, mentoring, recruiting. I actually started working back with Kurt about 12 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to start one of the largest groups here on LinkedIn dedicated specifically to pharmacists. And so back in 2010, started it, and it snowballed into, I want to say it's 62,858 as of this morning. We always say 60,000 plus, but we're getting up there now. And then also we have Melissa with us. So Melissa is incredible. I mean, she has 20 plus years of experience. She's been in multiple different practice settings. She herself has transitioned from in-person to a work from home managed care role. And just very excited to have her here. A little side note, her family, her son, her husband actually have COVID as we speak. And so she's a true warrior for being here. And I'm just excited to have her. I know we got that text early in the morning and couldn't be more excited to have you here, Melissa. And then she's one of our senior coaches here at Pharmacy Career Coach and has just done a wonderful job. I mean, worked with so many different pharmacists throughout the years. And then we have Kurt. So Kurt is a warrior as well. He's actually currently in Greece. So it is 3 a.m. where he's at. So if you think that Kurt doesn't care, well, actions speak louder than words. And here he is at 3 a.m. So very, very excited to have you here, Kurt.
The coffee's just now started to kick in too. So I'm doing great now. Hey,
all
everybody.
Right, we'll have Melissa keep an eye on you, that's for sure. And so Kurt's incredible. I mean, many, many years ago, he started one of the largest staffing agencies in the nation for pharmacy specific. And then several years ago, he founded Pharmacy Career Coach. Like I mentioned just a second ago, I've worked with him side by side for about 12 years. I'm incredibly innovative, very passionate about helping pharmacists. If you couldn't tell, 3 a.m. I literally don't, I was telling Melissa a second ago, I don't think I've seen Kurt wake up at 3 a.m. since I've ever known him. So there you have it.
First time for everything.
And so, yes, this presentation is brought to you by Pharmacy Career Coach. Just a quick overview. So we have had the opportunity to work with over 2,000 pharmacists. I love this snapshot because, yes, we've worked with 2,000 pharmacists, but it's affected thousands upon thousands of family members and people even beyond this. And so here's a quick snapshot. We have the old school pharmacy, come into the store, and then we have where you're able to work remotely. And so in the chat, we always like to get a little more interactive with this presentation. And so at this time, we love to hear a little bit more why you're even interested in working remote. And so if you plug that in the chat, we will be watching this later, and we just love to see this. And so, first of all, there's been some really transformative few years here. With COVID, it has really disrupted the status quo. Pharmacists have shifted into a much more high-value, patient-focused role. And pharmacies have shifted from this foot traffic to having the convenience of their own home. Pharmacists are playing a larger and larger role in patient care, and patients are wanting and demanding more digital and remote-based services. And here's some really interesting stats that we found. And so before COVID, there was only 3.6% of Americans work from home. And now that number has grown to over 62%. And the industries with the highest number is, first of all, healthcare is at 15%. Technology is trailing at 10%. And then financial services at 9%. And especially over the last 3 years, I've just seen this trend continue to rise and continue to rise. Even in the last month or two, we've just had a lot of phone calls with those that are looking to do remote roles. And then if not necessarily remote, hybrid is becoming very popular, where some work from home, some work at the workplace. And some employers are at this point starting to say it's time to go back to the workplace, and some are being unsuccessful at this point. And so just real fast, want to cover some of the main challenges that we hear as far as working within the pharmacy. So you have work-life balance, you have commute, which is not only the cost, but the time, and I'll touch on this in a second. You have safety. Unfortunately, there are robberies. I've personally talked to thousands of pharmacists over the last decade, and unfortunately, I hear about this more than you'd imagine. COVID-19 has been a real challenge and still linger. There's staffing issues. And then there's the trying to get time off or vacation time that just isn't provided, or it's very limited. And then another thing is you're geographically restricted. So you must live near the pharmacy. And so again, what is it that you find challenging? If you want to type in the chat box, we love it, because we've heard hundreds of responses, but there's always something new. There's always something interesting. But what is it that you find challenging about working within the pharmacy? And so now let's talk a little bit more about the benefits of working from home. So definitely a lot of flexibility. And so I think this has been the ongoing theme in the last couple of weeks that I've seen. There's work-life balance. There's no commute. And I had a little bit of fun with this. I think I did this a year or two ago, but I started looking into the average commute. And so it's roughly a half an hour each way, which is about an hour per day. And the part that's crazy, if you truly think about it, is that that's about 30 full 8-hour shifts, 34 full days, work days that you spend on an average commute. And for those that want remote, if you really think about it, yours might be shorter, it might be longer. Some of the longer commutes that I've seen are about 2 hours, so an hour each way. We're talking about 60 work days at that point. And I think the longest I've ever seen, if you have a longer commute than 2.5 hours, put it in the chat. We'll give you a standing ovation a little bit later. But that's probably the longest that I've heard, is 5 full hours in the day. That person loved podcasts, obviously. And then you also have spending less money. And so did the math here as well. And it's actually really funny. I was looking back at we did a remote workshop about 2-3 months ago. And at that time, Melissa, I think the gas prices in California were nearly $7.50. I looked it up today. The average is right at $4 a gallon. So for some quick math, which a lot of people don't look at, I mean, we start talking $2,600 a year. We have a pharmacist that was telling me he was getting 8 miles to the gallon. So I did the quick math for him, and his commute per year was 4,000 or more. So it depends on what your vehicle is, what your commute is, but we start talking 4,000 or more can really play into that overall compensation. And then another benefit, you can really live anywhere. So the biggest thing I've heard lately is a lot of it isn't necessarily you as the pharmacist, but you might have a spouse or significant other that their job allows you to travel, or their job allows them to travel, or maybe they just got relocated. And so we have a lot of pharmacists that are looking for that flexibility so that they can live anywhere and be with their partner. And then a lot of people talk about being much more productive at home. Obviously, this is case by case, but we found that a lot of people are much more productive. And then the safety, I don't know if you can see that, but safety from your own home, but that includes things like theft, that includes COVID-19, and just many more ways that you can be safe from working from home. And so there are downsides of working from home. We're not going to just ignore that. So there is isolation. If you're someone that absolutely thrives on human interaction, you can feel isolated working from home. Home offices aren't free. There are costs that are associated with that. As far as separating work from normal life, if your office is somewhere where you go from dinner to work and you just can't separate that lifestyle, that can be a real issue. And then some people fear that there's typically lower compensation. We'll touch a little bit on that later, but then you must have the right environment. There's a lot of pharmacists that have kids running all around. It can be challenging to keep a quiet workspace. And then it's difficult to build that camaraderie. Sometimes with virtual, you might lose a little sense of that. And so again, these are a lot of the main things that we're hearing. And so we'd also love to hear your thoughts. I mean, what is it that is challenging, or what do you feel like would be challenging for you? Everyone has their own things, but for working remotely. And so what is available and what is out there? Whenever we show this slide, this is just, roughly 10, 15 different roles that we've seen. Again, the free pamphlet that we're going to send you has even more than this, but just at random. You have prior authorization, you have informatics, you have drug safety, medical writer. We're going to jump into a variety of these as Melissa takes us on her journey, but this is just some of the many pathways that you can take. And I'm very excited for a lot of you to hear new and interesting opportunities. And so with that, Melissa is going to take the stage and at this point really take a closer look and kind of jump into that for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. That was a great introduction, and I can definitely speak to a lot of the advantages. And as I am in my second year of working from home, can even speak to how some of the disadvantages have become advantages and how I've worked around some of those things. And I'm talking to you all from my home office, and have my own cozy spot here. So there's lots of great things that we can talk about today. But what we're going to start with is going through different examples of remote practice settings. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about those so that you can learn a little bit more about the opportunities out there, and then dive into some ways that you might be able to position yourselves for those opportunities. So the first one we have here is remote order entry. And most of you probably can tell right off the bat just from the title what that means, but you're basically going to be entering orders or verifying orders remotely, usually for like a hospital or a long-term care facility. And so this is very similar to hospital work for anybody that has done that type of work. You typically need an active license in the state where the facility you are serving resides. So like, if you are working for a hospital in Texas, you typically have to have a Texas license. If you're working for a bigger entity, though, like Cardinal Health, that might be covered under some other processes and whatnot if they have larger licensures for themselves. So it really depends on the entity and what type of licensure, like state licensure, you need. Some of the other things is you obviously want to be very proficient with the computer. So you want to be one of those pharmacists that's very comfortable, maybe doing a little bit of your own IT. There you can always remote into your IT and they can look at your computer, but you want to be comfortable with your computer setup. And then one of the other things you want to think about is your interpersonal communication skills. And this is something I think that comes up for all these remote work positions, is that you are going to be communicating either via the phone, via group chats, online meetings. And so your interpersonal communication skills are going to be really important, and something that you would want to highlight when you're talking to a potential employer, because those skills are what they're looking for. They want to know that you can communicate well, even if you're not there in the office with them. And so when we look a little further at remote order entry, that's right. I wanted you to think about being an independent problem solver. And the reason I put that there too is that sometimes one of the positions I've held has been a hospital pharmacist. And there's so many times I would just like yell over hey, what would you do in this situation? And it's a little bit more difficult to do that when you're doing remote order entry. And so one of the things you would want to do is, how you try to really think through things on your own. And then there's usually ways for you to reach out and collaborate and ask questions, but definitely take some independence to do remote order entry. So how do you get there? Well, the more pharmacy systems so if anybody's out there and has used Epic or Cerner, which are two of the larger platforms utilized by hospitals, that is a really excellent plus. You may need to obtain multiple state license depending upon the company you work for, the position, and you might want to improve your computer proficiency or speed. So if you're one of those pharmacists that maybe isn't as computer literate, you might want to work on taking some courses in just using your computer. And then for some significant points to consider, one of the things that I've had some clients that I've worked with on ROE positions is that they've come up against the prior experience in hospital, or if it's a remote order entry for LTC, that the recruiters or the individuals want to know if there's prior experience in those settings. And one of the things that I want to point out is that most pharmacists have done some type of clinical review. And so your clinical review skills is a transferable skill that you can utilize to help move forward in that whole process and learning more about doing these things in the hospital or long-term care type setting. You can say, hey, I know how to look at a patient profile and move forward with that. And so I think that will be helpful to think about. One of the next practice settings I want to touch on is MTM. So a lot of you probably, especially if you're in the retail setting, have done some medication therapy management for your company, maybe in different capacities. There's a lot of people out there that I know have side jobs with companies like Aspen RX. And so basically there is someone's excited. They're a top performer for outcomes. That's awesome. So this is something that you would want to highlight as you move into communication with companies that you're interviewing for MTM positions. And basically you're going to provide those targeted interventions to assess overall appropriateness of the patient's medication regimen and looking at their barriers to adherence, what's happening, what's keeping them from getting their refills, and making sure that you're overall improving outcomes for the patient is really what it comes down to. And so what do you need for this? There are different certifications out there. And then you would want to have some familiarity with things like HEDIS and STARS. You want to know what those are so that you can discuss that with the interviewer when looking at these types of positions. You can talk about motivational interviewing. I think that that's a transferable skill that a lot of pharmacists forget that they have. You all know how to interview someone because when they walk up to your counter or they call you on the phone or whatever practice setting you're in, you're figuring out answers to questions that you need to clinically solve problems. And so that's something that is a really great transferable skill to capitalize on, especially for MTM and working with your customer base being the general public. And then of course, another great skill that you all have is patient education and consulting. So this is one of the things that is definitely a key point with MTM, is you're going to be providing some of that guidance. And then your collaboration with healthcare professionals. So this is something that comes into play with a lot of these remote roles, with any pharmacist role. But it's good to note these things because I find that a lot of pharmacists think that this is just common knowledge, common sense, but it's important to be able to highlight these skills that you have as you work towards these different roles. And so this is where you want to demonstrate that you already do this, right? Like you already know how to go through and review a med list, and you know how to evaluate drug interactions or monitor adherence. And these are things that may seem like just day-to-day normal functions, but when you articulate how you're doing that, and one of the things you could do is even start to note in your current job, like how many consultations are you doing per shift? If you're doing MTM in your current position, how many CMRs are you completing? And so taking note of some of those metrics in your current work is something that you can also capitalize on. And then there are different certificates out there. I have had some clients that have gone through the board certification process that's available. Others have done the APHA course, and that has a lot of specificity around delivering MTM services and can sometimes be a little bit more targeted towards if you want to set up your own MTM consulting type of business. And then the Power Pack CE, if you haven't done the Power Pack CE for MTM and you need CEs, this is a great CE course because it goes over a lot of the basic like diabetes, hypertension in a very like thorough manner, and then it does give you some great information about MTM services in general. So, and that one is the most cost effective, and a lot of the companies that you might be interviewing for, if they see that you've done that as kind of your base, and then you can always say, well, I'm interested in getting board certification if that's something your company would like me to do, right? So you don't always have to have all these things completed before you apply. So we have some great case studies that I'm going to share with you as we go through these different practice settings. So this is Eve, and Eve went to a 100% remote clinical MTM role after being in retail for 10 years. And she really felt like the breakthrough for her was recognizing how the days were taking a toll on her, from her commute to standing to being there. And now she's just really enjoying getting to work with patients and doing what she loves in the area of pharmacy and being able to optimize their medications from the comfort of her home, as she said. So then here's the next area I'd like to talk about, and this is the area that I'm working in currently. So managed care, or PBM. And as most of you know, like especially if you're working retail, you're working with the PBM companies or managed care companies to get those authorizations through, to get your patients the medications. So this is the whole behind the scenes force that is impacting what's covered, formularies, managing those formularies, and providing authorizations. So what would you want to know as far as trying to get a role in PBMs? We have a few points here that we would like to go over, and I can share those with you. So when you think about managed care, one of the things you can do, and there's something I'll point out to you on the next slide, is that there's multiple roles available for you in managed care. So right now I work as a prior authorization pharmacist, which is also considered a clinical specialist. They sometimes refer to this as utilization management because you're managing how the drugs and the cost effectiveness of the drug utilization among the public. Some might be referred to as like a case review pharmacist. There's also individuals that are clinical programs advisors. I know one of our other career coaches, I think she just recently got promoted and she's working in clinical services for a PBM. And then there's also formulary management, where you're looking at formulary details, what's going on formulary. Maybe you're part of the guidelines team and you're looking at what the guidelines are. And then there is also things like that I didn't know about until I got into this more, but appeals and quality assurance. So there's a lot there in this area. So what can you do to demonstrate that you already do this in your current role? Again, this is kind of a theme, right? Like, what is it that you can show as your transferable skill? And for those of you that are on the community side, you know the prior auth process and how it impacts patients. And so you can also talk about, your ability to analyze claims data. That's important because that comes up a lot and part of your review process. You understand drug tiers and copays. You communicate with the healthcare providers, and you are an expert in drug information. You're a pharmacist. And so these are things that you can capitalize on when you're talking about what you already do. And there are a couple things out there. The prior authorization certificate specialist, certified specialist, is more geared towards technicians that are coming into that role, because technicians do a large amount of this work. But I have had a couple clients that have gone through that certification just so that they would get familiar with more of the lingo and some of the understanding of what it was like in the world of doing PAs. And then I highly recommend checking out the Academy of Managed Care Pharmacists if you're interested in this area. And they have a whole learning certificate section there on their website. And so there's just a wealth of information. They have some free little PowerPoint seminars that you can listen to and learn more and pick up some of the lingo and some of the terms that are familiar for people that are in this, PBM roles and world. So anyways, this is a great area. And so one of the things we have here is we have a few case studies that I'll share with you. So this is Anika, and she was a manager in retail and worked really, really hard and really put her patients first. And she was ready for a shift and wanted to spend more time. I think she has 3 little girls at home. And so she was ecstatic to get an offer and work as a prior authorization pharmacist. So that was a great change for her. And then this is Brittany, and you'll see hers is now a case review pharmacist. So these are different terms that you'll see, and something that I really try to work with the clients on when we're doing some career coaching is how to use the terms that are posted. And some of them, like my title is clinical specialist, it doesn't have pharmacist even in the title. So if you're doing a search for that, you might not find it. And so that's why it's good to start learning about who are some of the companies and start making some of those contacts. And then we also have a utilization management pharmacist, and he got a job with Humana and really appreciated our guidance on his career journey. So yeah, definitely something to think about. Like, how are you doing your searches? And this is something the coaching staff at Pharmacy Career Coach can definitely help you with, and something to be aware of when you're doing those different searches out there on the job boards. All right, so CROs. So contract research organizations are really growing. I was recently reading an article about these companies, and if you are someone that loves project management or clinical trials or seeing things from kind of more of the industry standpoint, this is a great way to enter into industry. So CROs contract with the pharmaceutical and biotech companies to then provide services on their behalf. So whether it's preclinical trials, clinical trials, even post-marketing surveillance, they will do they'll even do some of the regulatory affairs matters. And so if any of those aspects of the kind of journey of a medication going from discovery to the public, a CRO is a great place to work. And I would recommend doing a Google search and check out, like, there's one out there I saw, the top 10 CRO companies in 2022. So what does this take? And who would be the people really interested in this? It definitely is centered around clinical trials. So you would want to be a pharmacist that's interested in the clinical trial process in the kind of the pharma biotech industry area. You want to have great communication skills where you can talk with individuals openly and be able to express yourself so that you can talk about these different aspects of the clinical trials, or communicate. What I'm trying to say is really communicate across lines of business. So you're not going to be just talking to other pharmacists or healthcare providers. You might be talking to sales and marketing, or you might be talking to someone that is very scientific, like in the labs, and you're trying to communicate with them about what's happening with the patients. So there's a lot of communication skills there. And then organization and project management skills. So that's why I said, if you're someone that likes project management, this can be a really great area for you to explore. And then there's, these companies are big, like there's a lot happening with them, and they have strong workforces, so they can often be great places as far as stability, as far as companies go. And so one of the things to think about when you're communicating with these companies is you want to make sure that you're demonstrating your interest in scientific research. And I've had a few clients that they had actually worked for a CRO before, and some of them had come from overseas, and they had worked in a different country and they had CRO background. And then we use that to leverage their ability to get positions in industry or in other areas like project management type positions. So like the CRO. And so one of the things that I think is great is to think about what organizations or companies might you want to become affiliated with? So this is where you kind of have to step outside the box a little bit, and you might not just be connecting with other pharmacy organizations on LinkedIn or in your social media realms, that you might want to start looking, following some of these CROs on LinkedIn, seeing where these people and these individuals gather, and what conferences do they go to. And that might be great ways to do some networking, because it is one of the things that we all know, but maybe don't always acknowledge, is that networking and knowing people is one of the number one ways you're going to get a job. And that's why it's so great. Mike is amazing with his pharmacy group on LinkedIn, and he knows a lot about those skills. And we have a lot of individuals that are there to help you with a lot of those networking pieces within Pharmacy Career Coach team. So this is Lynn. Lynn was so passionate about getting a job in industry. And so she looked at a lot of different angles of how to get into industry, and found that she could get a CRO role, and that would really leverage her into the area that she wanted to be working in. And her whole background is just in retail. She didn't have any other like clinical study background or anything, but she was very outgoing and very motivated. And so she completely redid her resume, and we spent a lot of time working with some of the industry coaches at Pharmacy Career Coach to get her some more support and an interview prep to get into this direction. So she really used all of her resources and some great networking skills to land that job. And then, so medical science liaison, or MSL, is another area within industry that people are really excited about. And there's a lot here. So I would say that these currently are probably your hybrid work positions, where there's going to be some work from home, some traveling. So now that things have, the beginning of COVID, everyone was just kind of doing all of this remote, but now that things are open again, then what I've talked to people doing MSL roles is they do a lot of their day-to-day work from their quote unquote home office or their car or wherever. It can be more of a traveling job sometimes. So there will be certain expectations to show up at specific locations. So that's just one of the things I remind people who are really interested in MSL, is this is more of a hybrid opportunity, because you'll be talking with physicians and other healthcare professionals about emerging therapies and potentially going places and doing presentations. So that's where I think for these individuals, you definitely want to be on the strong side for your communication and presentation skills. And someone who wants to take initiative, that's something that I think they'll really look for in the individuals when they're interviewing for this. And then from a informational standpoint, you want to make sure that you understand the life cycle of the pharmaceutical companies and things going from inception, kind of like the idea design, all the way through the clinical trials to the end point. So like a CRO is going to be a company that might do part of those clinical trials, but then you as the MSL might take some of the information that was gathered by those companies and then apply it to your detailing, marketing of these different therapies to the physicians. And so what is the path? Well, one of the things as far as a transferable skill is I would want you to see that you are a liaison already. You work between the physicians and the customers and the patients every single day. And that is something that when you're talking to someone, because it's easy sometimes for the individuals in these different realms that, maybe your first interview is not with a pharmacist. It might be a recruiter. It might be another individual that doesn't necessarily know what you do day to day as a pharmacist. And so you want to be able to talk their lingo. You want to be able to share with them that you do liaison between the client, the patient, and the physician on a regular basis, and that basically the target entity of what you're detailing, which is the pharmaceuticals, and that you talk with physicians every day. So one of the things to demonstrate is your ability to do this communication and collaboration And a couple of things that I've had clients work on in their resumes is demonstrating what they've done with vaccination clinics and all the collaboration that they've done there, or different ways that they've provided medical information. Maybe they've given a presentation to their community, or maybe they'll seek out an opportunity to give a presentation to their community. These are just some different things that might be helpful on the path to becoming an MSL. So this is Rebecca. And Rebecca was working mostly with retail experience. I can say one of the little nuggets that she had was that she was invited to talk on a radio show, and she was like the pharmacist on the radio show, and people would call in and ask her questions, and she fielded questions live on the radio. And then she had also been a coach. I think it was like for like a women's basketball team in her community. And so these are things to be aware of, that these aren't necessarily her day-to-day job things that she was doing in retail, but they were just little nuggets that she was able to share, and that showed her communication style, her innovation. And what she really found that was helpful when she was working with us at Pharmacy Career Coach was finding positions that she wasn't aware of, and how to really leverage networking and really digging deep into the interview prep. She worked both with myself and an industry career coach on getting ready for those interviews, because it is a long, and you have to be ready for a little bit of a long process. Some of these companies take a little bit of time, but once you're there at the end, touched base with her. She absolutely loves what she's doing, and she's delighted that she went through the transition. All right. So, okay. Medical information. So this, some pharmacists don't realize this is a realm. This is a whole area out there. And if you think about it, every day we refer to medical information. So whether you're looking at, the compendium, you're looking at clinical pharmacology or drug decks. I mean, you have pharmacists that are working on those, or your package inserts, or there could be a company that's offering medical education to individuals. And so pharmacists are often the ones providing that information, fielding calls. You could be part of a pharmacist call center for a company and fielding those questions that might come in. And so one of the things that I think is important for this role is having some of that enthusiasm for looking at aggregate based information. So you really want to be able to say, population-based studies show X, Y, and Z. The primary literature might say this, but then we're only at the point of being able to state this because of what's been published. So there's these layers there. And so there's definitely maybe a little bit of the bookworm in there that is good. And so that might be a good fit for this role. So how do we get there? What is the pathway? If you have done any type of presenting or written any papers, that is something that some of these companies will want to see, like writing samples. So then maybe you get involved with like Contact Pharmacy Times or one of these other, pharmacy publications, and see if you can start writing on the side, right? There's these different little things that can contribute, but then there's also individuals that break into this that haven't done that. And one of the groups that you can learn more about all of this is Drug Information Association. They are an international association, and they have some great conferences on a regular basis. And so that might be a good place of starting your networking, getting to know pharmacists there. So yeah, we can go to Kara. So let's talk about Kara. She was just really needing to have the confidence that she could make this transition. And I can say that clarity and confidence are two big things that I really work on with people. Once you know where you want to go, and then you take that and you instill the confidence in yourself that you can get there, then things really start happening. So she had received a full-time medical info role and had only had a retail background. So yeah, so this is great, right? You're starting to see that a lot of these examples are people with just retail background. And even though I'm presenting to you like these different things you can do to get there, a lot of these people just took their background, communicated their transferable skills, and landed new roles. So I think we have Yes, and then medical writing is kind of a spin-off, I would say, from the medical information. So this would be more specific to writing the scientific documents, where medical information is more like information management. This is like you're creating like an actual article or a manuscript. Maybe you work for a healthcare website. There's more of these companies that are realizing what pharmacists have to offer. And so some of these jobs might be things where pharmacist might not be in the title, right? And so you want to be searching for these types of positions from the standpoint of that this role could also be fulfilled by maybe a nurse or a physician or another healthcare professional. And so this is where, you know, you want to have those familiarity with medical concepts. You definitely want to be an independent worker. I think that this is definitely something where you might not have as much collaboration as some of the other roles, and then strong written ability for sure. So this year, I read this article and was looking at where to find medical writing jobs. And this is where this is great to have this at this point in the presentation, because it layers upon a lot of the different roles I've already talked about. So some of the CROs are looking for medical writers. Some of the pharmaceutical companies are looking for medical writers. And then you might have things like medical journals, or like I said earlier, healthcare websites. So there are more opportunities out there, I think, than sometimes people realize. And if you get a little bit creative with conceptualizing where your skill set and your interests lie in relation to how you might be able to apply the clinical knowledge you have as a pharmacist, there's some cool stuff out there. So, oh, and this is Alex. And so Alex, he got 3 different medical writing offers, and only had a retail background. And so this is just another example of how this is possible, and definitely would encourage all of you to muster up that confidence and start to figure out, like, what is right for you? Like, what fits? Like, as you listen to me go through these different practice settings, think about, do I want to work remotely? Like, are you happy in a room? Like, I feel like I can talk about this. I'm sitting in the room where I work in, and it's great because I can do the lighting the way I want it. My commute is to the coffee machine, and then, you know, my coffee maker, and then back to my desk. I was one of those people that had close to 45 minutes to an hour each way to the hospital that I was working at. And as Mike mentioned, I live in San Diego, and the price of gas is very expensive. We're still over $5 here a gallon, even at Costco. And then, you know, think about your skill set. When I went through all these different settings, think of, you know, do some, I always call free writing really your friend when you're trying to find clarity, because you can try to think about, how do I match up my skill set to where I want to be? And that also pertains to your background and your experience. And then, which practice settings do you find interesting? So for me, I've worked in both retail and hospital settings. And as a prior authorization pharmacist, I've really been able to connect the dots. And so now I'm like a team lead, like support person, and able to answer a lot of clinical questions for the team because I have that background. So rather than being someone that's only been in the managed care world, I can apply my clinical and retail and real kind of, I'll call it the real world, like out there face to face with the patients, and apply that to the managed care setting, because I can envision myself in those different practice settings applying this information. So think about it, see what options check your boxes. And I think at this point, I'm going to hand the mic back over to Mike.
Perfect, perfect. Well, sounds great, Melissa. Really appreciate it, and just such a wealth of knowledge. It's always incredible to hear you talk, and can definitely tell you're passionate about it as well. And so, yeah, here at Pharmacy Career Coach, we've had the opportunity to really develop our system for many, many years, and we've put it into a framework. And so just briefly want to go over kind of our 6-step framework with you, and what we do in order to help get, at this point, thousands of pharmacists hired and find those positions that they're really looking for. And it's nice because Melissa already talked about some of this a little bit, but just kind of want to dive into our process and what that looks like. And so, especially recently, I've noticed that clarity, that's our very first step. Very, very important. We get it all across the spectrum. Some pharmacists have 20 ideas, some have 0. And so we really want to get focused in on having a minimum of 3 and ideally 5. So that's where, obviously we covered a ton today, but if you can get to where you have 5 ideas narrowed down that you're actually qualified for, it can make your search that much more effective. And like Melissa talked about a couple times, like really making sure that these opportunities check your boxes. And so here's just a snapshot. I think this is maybe a third of the team, but we have so many qualified coaches that know a variety of roles. I mean, Melissa is incredible. Rebecca, who she mentioned, is actually a coach now. So student turned coach, if you will. And we've just had the opportunity to really build out our team and really specialize in different areas that we can help you out with. And then from there, we have to develop a plan. So you have to have a proven plan, a proven strategy. And if you're out there not even knowing where to place that first step or second step, that's where we can really help you out to find this desired role. And then each pathway that she talked about has its nuances, has just different abilities and skill sets that you really need to highlight. And then even with that, kind of maybe reducing any weaknesses or redundancies that come along with how you're presenting yourself. And so then jumping into positioning, this is very, very important. If you've had a chance to hear some of our videos, I know you saw some of the snapshots, but a lot of our pharmacists talk about how you have to stand out. There's a lot of skill sets that you have that you really need to bring to the forefront and really make sure that it helps you stand out amongst the competition or other pharmacists that are looking for these roles. And you have to have a resume, you have to have a cover letter that stand out, and then you absolutely have to have a LinkedIn profile. I'm just touching base on the cover letter. It gets really, really mixed reviews. We have some people that say it doesn't work, employers don't see it, it's not part of the process. Sometimes they don't even ask for it. But we have a lot of our head coaches or hiring managers themselves. And there's sometimes where they'll pinpoint that cover letter that can not only bring in the interview, but it can make the difference between getting hired or not. So it's very, very important. And then that LinkedIn profile, we've been big on this for many, many years. I love LinkedIn. It's just such an incredible tool. Most people we work with think like they're either starting or think that, hey, I have a great LinkedIn profile, but there's really a lot that goes into it. And we found that anywhere between about 70 to 80% of employers are looking at that. So it can either hurt you, it can do nothing for you, or it can help you. And you really want it so that it's helping you. And then as far as finding these jobs, so I've probably heard at least a couple hundred pharmacists talk about just applying and hoping. Applying and hoping. The really challenging part, and almost it's a little bit devastating to see behind the scenes, but there could be a position that you're applying to that already has hundreds of applicants, and that's not an exaggeration. Yeah, there's, I mean, hundreds or dozens of applicants, and sometimes those positions are already filled. And so you really have to work on creating and leveraging your network. So not only who you're connecting with, but also how you're connecting with them. And then this is where we really want you to tap into what we call the hidden job market. And so last month alone, I mean, we had 30 plus job offers that came through, and a lot of our pharmacists are getting hired in positions that aren't even necessarily posted. And so a lot of that comes down to finding the right people and leveraging the right connections. And then of course there's interview. Interview is definitely one of those things where you have to be first place. Second place, third place, fourth place, unfortunately does not get you hired and get you the job. And so there's a lot of preparation, there's the execution, and there's the follow-up. So we really make sure, especially as you're looking to go, obviously you might be comfortable where you're at or very familiar or very knowledgeable about where you're at, but you really have to figure out where you're going in order, and especially highlight the right things in order to land these remote roles. And then we also have a lot of fun with this. So we do help with offer negotiation as well. Some people love it. Most people shy away from it, kind of get the offer letter and they're very excited to sign off on it. But that's where we've had the opportunity to connect with pharmacists, really figure out what's as competitive as possible. And it's fun, even in today's job market. We've helped several people negotiate, I mean, anywhere from like $3,000 to $10,000 on their contract. And we just really want to make sure people go in comfortable and confident on this part of the process. There is always room for negotiation, and you really have to look at the full compensation package. And so with that, with our 6 steps that all synchronize together, this is the point where we've helped a lot of pharmacists get hired. And if you're following this process time and time again, it's been proven, and ultimately results in a lot of happy pharmacists that have made that transition and found that job opportunity. And so, yeah, at this time, I mean, we would love to invite you to set up a free consultation with our team. If you want to go to pharmacycareercoach.com/remote consultation, we're going to email this out as well. Highly recommend that you do this as soon as possible. If you want to take a moment even right now to go to pharmacycareercoach.com/remote consultation. We're definitely going to talk further about your clarity, help answer any questions that you might have. I know this is a lot of information, so we would love the opportunity to connect with you after this. And like I said, we are going to email this out. It should maybe be in the chat, or it looks like it's already in the chat. But yeah, just love the opportunity. I mean, day in and day out, we're talking with incredible pharmacists that are anywhere from completely lost to know that they want remote and know what they're focusing on, but really the ability to help you gain even more clarity and find your way to these remote positions. And so, yeah, so our main bread and butter really is our one-on-one mentorship. A lot of the case studies you've seen throughout the presentation, again, that's the snapshot. It's been a lot of fun. I've had the opportunity to actually interview a lot of our pharmacists on the side with the smiley face, where they've made that success story, and you can actually see those on YouTube as well. But we really line you up to work all the way through this process, from very beginning, middle, all the way to the very end. And I mean, your success is what we're ultimately looking to help accomplish. And our goal really is to give you the easiest and fastest results. I know a lot of people feel like, hey, this is something I can do on my own, or great, I mean, no problem. But we've really put a lot of time, a lot of effort. I mean, years upon years, we've brought in a ton of experts. I mean, we have resume writer, cover letter writer. Our panel of coaches are complete experts. And so our goal and our opportunity is to help you streamline this and really get to that endpoint that you're looking for. And then we've done this long enough that we are 100% confident in our results. And so we try very, very hard not to work with anyone that we feel like we can't help out. And so that's why we set up the clarity session. That's why we really dive in. We have questions. Everyone, like 7, 8 years ago, we might have worked with anyone and everyone, but in the last several years, we've really dwindled that down. I think we're working about 30% of those that we talk to, or 40%. But we want to make sure that it's a good fit for you and a good fit for us. But we do offer those result guarantees. And so with all that, we had to throw the easy button in there, but we're just trying to make it look as easy as possible and make your life as easy as possible as you're looking for these remote opportunities. And so we were flooded with questions, and we really appreciate it. I mean, we had several hundred questions that already came in. I know that the chat is built for that as well. But just want to take a moment. First of all, thank you, Elizabeth, for sending in this question. And I was going to pitch this up to Melissa. But Elizabeth M., her question was, do you have to live in the same city, state, or even country that the job is located in?
So this is a great question, because there's a lot of variability in the answer to this question based upon the company that you work for. So I can use a few different examples. I did have one colleague from pharmacy school who was working for a company she lived in the Netherlands, and she was still working for a company here in America because she was a licensed pharmacist in a couple different states here in America. And so she was able to do that in another country. There are individuals on my team that live all over the US. I happen to be in a San Diego based company, so I'm close to my headquarters, but there are plenty of people that live in other states. And there's actually variability in the licensure on my team. So there are even specific things that some of the pharmacists can do because they have a California license, because we're a California based company, and some that they can't. So there's so much variability here that I wouldn't let this inhibit you in your search and in your looking. This is where you start just going out there and seeing where are the opportunities. And if there's a role that you're limited because you don't have licensure in that particular state because they want you to have that, you can even ask them, hey, I'm willing to take the test. Can I come on board? I have the skill set you want, and I'm willing to get licensed in your state. So the basic answer is it varies, but there's a lot of opportunity to match yourself to jobs in this area.
That's perfect. And thanks again, Elizabeth, for sending that in. And thank you, Melissa. And so got another question here from Shaquita P. And again, all your questions we're looking to get answered, but these are some of the select few that we chose. But Shaquita said, how do you sell yourself during the job search and interview phase for remote jobs?
And so this is great because this really aligns with one of the things that I feel like Pharmacy Career Coach does really well, which is developing your elevator pitch. And so when you know how you would describe yourself as a pharmacist and the job that you want in like 60 seconds, and I work with people on really distilling this down, it makes a major impact. And so that is one of the things that when your first impression is basically telling your employer how you are going to serve them and fulfill the role in your opening statements to them, you are definitely going to be in a quote selling yourself or like marketing yourself for those positions. And so that's one of the things I think, matching your skill set, being able to articulate your strengths and then show or demonstrate how those strengths then match what the employer's looking for. Boom, you've created a great, pitch right there. And so it's something that I think all the coaches are very passionate about helping individuals formulate that.
Absolutely. So then I hope I'm saying this right, but I have Sharon P. Are the hours flexible or set?
So I love this one because so again, it depends. So those who are working for companies like Aspen RX, or some of the roles where you would be working in more of a contractor role, then sure, your hours might be pretty flexible. But then a lot of companies still have like normal, like office, business hours. And so it really depends again on whom you're working for and what is it that the company needs. And so that might be one of the things that if your box is to have completely flexible hours, then you're probably going to be looking at more of a consulting or contractual kind of job. If you're okay with having more set hours and working within the limits of when your business or company that you're working for is open, then you're going to have more set hours. So it just depends on, what you're looking for and what the company is looking for, and aligning those two things.
Excellent. So then last but not least, we have a question from Rabi M. And it's, can you negotiate remote job offers? If so, how?
So I'm thinking that this one is like, can I negotiate that my job be remote, even though it might not list itself as remote? Is that how you took this one, Mike?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So I'm thinking, so this speaks to the whole hybrid concept, right? And when you were talking about those statistics at the beginning, for example, my husband is in a hybrid situation where he goes into the office, and then at times like this, when we end up getting COVID in the house, he can still work if he needs to. He can remote in. I worked some today. It's just, it makes for that flexibility, right? Even though my son has to be home from school for a certain number of days. So it's just, it all works out, right? As far as negotiating remote, it's going to really depend on the position. And the reason I'm kind of chuckling about this is that I was still working per diem at the hospital when I first got this remote job. And I remember one of the technicians saying, "Oh, Melissa, I wish I could bring the IV room home so that I can make the IVs at home." And so, it's just, there's certain things that are really important that happen in healthcare that have to happen in person. But there might be opportunities out there where you're working on the IT team. There was a lot of the IT pharmacists who had worked in the office quite a bit before COVID at the hospital. And then once COVID came, they just completely remoted. And then there's this realization among companies, hey, my employees can do this work from home. I don't necessarily need to put them in an office, or et cetera, et cetera. And so there definitely is the room for that if it's the right role, is basically my bottom line. You got to have the right role.
That's perfect. Well, appreciate that as well. And so again, yes, if you're looking to connect with our team, we'd love the chance to connect with you further. Again, that's pharmacycareercoach.com/remote-consultation. Really hope you take us up on that. I know our schedule's getting flooded as summer comes to an end and we're entering fall. So definitely take a moment to do that right away. And we just love the opportunity to get to know you further. Can't thank you enough for all coming out tonight and making this a priority. Melissa, you're amazing. I really appreciate your time. And I hope your husband and kid have a quick recovery here. Kurt waking up at 3 a.m., that's as impressive as it gets. And the one last thing before you take off, since you all made it here, we will be sending you out this free report. It has an impressive amount of job opportunities. It's going to, if you have questions now, this is going to help answer a lot of those questions and different roles that are available. But again, we can't thank you enough for being here. I hope you have a wonderful night, and we look forward to connecting with all of you soon. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, have a great night, everyone.